Welcome to the Comic Sauce Podcast, where we talk comics and comics culture. I am Henry Liu, and today I'm joined by Porfirio Rangel. Porfirio, how's it going?
It's all good, Henry. It is warm down here in SoCal, so I'm envious and I miss the Bay Area weather you guys are probably having up there.
I am also joined by Christian Diadamo. Christian, how goes?
Hey, it goes well. Yeah, it's finally starting to cool down here.
Yes, we had a bit of a heat wave for quite some time, but finally it's cooling down. And it's comfortable here in the Bay. Today is October 10th, 2024, and we're about a week in from the Joker sequel's release. So we're going to talk all about it. Joker 2. So first off, do we know how to pronounce the title of this movie? Anyone want to take a crack at it?
Joker Folie Deluxe. I
Nice.
don't
That's a
I
good
don't
one.
Christian, you,
I think it's I want to say Folie Deux or Folie Deux,
I think
but
that's pretty much it.
as
Uh,
close as I can. That's what
yeah.
everyone called the Fallout Boy album in high school.
There
So
you
that's what I'm going
go.
for here.
Yes.
Folie
Like,
Deux.
yeah, it's kind of like the American accent of it, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
basically it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's only because I like researched it beforehand. But that's it. Joker, Folie à deux. So we're gonna talk all about it. And um spoiler alert, this is a pretty recent release, so you've been warned. Let's get into it. I'm gonna moderate the discussion. And we all saw it last weekend, the first weekend of release. And yeah, there have been some pretty strong opinions on this film. So let's dive in, shall we? So, so we talked about the pronunciation. What does the title mean? Do we know what the meaning is of Folie à deux?
Oh, I know this one actually.
Oh yeah?
Shared psychosis.
Ah, nice. So Christian obviously did his homework here. Excellent.
But not on how to pronounce it correctly.
All right. So so right off the bat, a very unconventional title. This isn't a French film, right? They chose to have a French title. Um, yeah. Well, any thoughts on that? Like that, this kind of goes along with how we went into the movie expectations. Like just the first thing that probably struck us before we even saw the trailer, before we saw a minute of the movie is the title. Like it's a very unconventional title. What are our thoughts about the title before even seeing the movie?
I guess if we want to get into the title, I think the title is actually pretty solid, because of course, like this is about introducing Harley Quinn, and there's like the idea of like a shared psychosis between them, two crazy lovers. Well, also, deux is two in Spanish, or sorry, French.
Hmm.
Deux, I'm probably also saying that wrong, is you know, two in French, so like having that there, Joker 2. So I think the name is actually fairly clever.
I haven't given much thought to the title, but I guess like yeah, my initial reaction to it was I think they announced the name the 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 name to the sequel when they announced that Gaga got casted as Harley Quinn,
Hmm.
and I guess my initial thoughts were like, okay, they're going for like some kind of like musical romantic theme. Um, and yeah, like I was like, this is not gonna be like the first one, but let's see where this goes, you know?
There you go. Yeah, my quick take was I was kind of baffled, I was like, what? And was kind of frustrated because I was like, this is not a great title for like a Batman type movie, right? But I get what you're saying, Christian, and it goes along with what the movie turned out to be. It's an unconventional title for an unconventional movie, right? So that it kind of goes along with that. So I kind of get that. So let's get right into the movie itself, yeah? Again, spoiler alert. Now, there's a lot we can talk about here, I think. So maybe we'll just kind of do our standard format and just organically it'll kind of evolve into a deeper discussion. But yeah, maybe we can just start out with what we liked about the movie. Any positives we want to call out for the Joker sequel here?
Gaga's in it. Like, I mean, like you guys both know, I'm like the biggest Gaga fan. She got casted as Harley Quinn. I'm a big Harley Quinn fan. So for me, this was like the dream cast, you know?
Hmm.
And I'll leave it at that for now until we get to the negative parts.
There you go. Well, yeah, the further on that, I would say it's a pretty cool choice to have Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn, but also it's not just an acting performance, it's a musical performance also, right? So you're kind of playing to two strengths of Gaga, right? Like she's an excellent actor, she's an excellent musician, right? And she does both here. So it's kind of a cool showcase, right? Um, yeah, any more thoughts on Gaga? Yeah, I had this on like my topics list. So yeah, let's go more into it. What do we think about the performance overall?
With Gaga.
Yeah.
Um, so just to clarify for everyone, she is playing Harley Quinn, but a different version of her. Because in this movie, her name is Lee Quinzel,
Mm-hmm.
and she's given an entirely different origin story to how we know Harley Quinn from the animated series and the comics. Um, she's not Joker's psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum. She checks herself into the asylum because she wants to meet Arthur. Um, and so that part of the story, I mean, like, with any adaptation, like, or any version of a character, there's always like different stories that could be adjusted or told. So I give him props for changing up the storyline and not giving us the same stuff they've given us with Harley Quinn and previous movies and TV shows like with in the Su in Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah, I agree. I like the different take on Harley Quinn because usually in most like Batman media, Joker's kind of the one manipulating her, whereas in this one, she's the one manipulating him. The way she's like, uh, you think she's just another inmate in Arkham, but later you find out that she really has a psychology degree and like checked herself in and then checked herself out later in order to get close to Arthur Fleck. And she's like someone who's almost like so in love with the idea of the Joker. It brings like this like sort of meaning to her life
Hmm.
that she kind of manipulates Arthur Fleck into going kind of further down that Joker rabbit hole, or kind of bringing that persona back out. So
Yeah,
I thought that was a pretty cool take on her.
yeah, like elaborating more on what Christian say, like yeah, like this version of her, she isn't intrigued with that like doctor-patient relationship that we know Harley Quinn from Batman media, but she's fascinated from a film that was released in that universe, and that's she's like a roadie, I guess, in a way, like just a fan who
Hmm.
is associated with becoming obsessed and meeting this person.
Right on. Yeah, I guess a good disclaimer is the fact that this movie is an entirely different universe than pretty much anything we've seen or read. It's not canon, it's not connected to the DCEU, to James Gunn's DC universe, to really anything we've seen before, right? It's just a new, unique vision, right? So uh I think there's a lot of anger about some of those aspects we can maybe talk about later. But yeah, I guess I that's a good thing to know, I think, for folks going into the movie. If you're expecting this to be any way related to, the Snyderverse or the Dark Knight trilogy or the Rob Pattinson's The Batman, like you got a big surprise coming. It's nothing to do with any of that, right? So yeah, there is that. But yeah, sticking with the current theme of the positives, we were talking about Gaga as uh, having an acting performance here, but also a musical performance. I definitely put down as a positive the the unique quality of the movie, and that is the fact that it is a musical, right? I'm not a huge fan of musicals, but for the first half of the movie or so, I definitely found that kind of refreshing. Like it just felt like something I'd never seen before, you know, a a story from the superhero realm, but told in a way that has never been seen before, in a musical format. It was really kind of like fearless filmmaking in a way, yeah. So I was kind of digging it for the first half or so. And oh yeah, so specifically the way the musical numbers played out, that was kind of interesting to me because it kind of blurred the lines between, are they actually singing? Like, are the characters singing in the context of the film? Or is it just in their heads? And I think there's a bit of both happening. I think in some cases, Arthur Fleck is literally singing out loud, right? But there are other times where the musical numbers are just thoughts and things happening in people's heads, right? So it's kind of surreal and kind of makes for an interesting experience. So I thought that was kind of cool. So it's bold, it's audacious. It may have run its course a bit later on in the film, I think, but initially, at least, I think it was kind of a cool, unique thing to experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
Any thoughts on the musicality of the movie?
yeah, I just want to agree with you, Henry. Like, I think it was, you know, with, I guess, the superhero genre now, like, there's definitely like Marvel and DC be taking like different takes on what's the traditional superhero storyline. Marvel did a few risks with She-Hulk breaking the fourth wall, WandaVision with the TV shows. Even recently, Agatha, for adding a little bit like musical elements in there. And they tried something risky here, and like you, I think there were some parts where it really worked, where the musical, like you didn't know if it was happening in his head or
Hmm.
they were singing it out loud. Like you just kind of delve into like the mind of Arthur and what he was thinking, and I just thought that was a unique concept, and it may have overstayed its welcome, but um I thought it was unique and risky. Uh and yeah, Christian, you want to add more to it?
Yeah. I there really is no movie, especially in the superhero realm, I would say that's quite like Joker Folie do.
Hmm.
Like a courtroom drama mixed with a musical. I think it's a pretty unique idea.
Hmm.
A big criticism of Joker 1 was that, oh, well, it's just Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy mashed together. It's
Hmm.
just those two movies and that's it. Um, for a superhero blockbuster movie in 2019, I'd actually say that was quite a bit of fresh air for the genre. That it was like this homage to these old movies from the 70s. But the criticism, it does ring true a bit. But I will say there's no movie quite like this one. And I did grow very tired of the music. I will say there's a couple solid musical sections. I think the one where um they're in the courtroom and Joker takes the hammer to the judge was one I really liked, and I also quite like the one where it said it was like they were on TV and it said Joker and Harley behind them and they had this like duet
Mm,
and they were
mm,
singing to each other. Those were a couple of musical sequences I thought were pretty good.
mm.
Excellent take. So, yeah, watching this movie for me, it really did feel like Todd Phillips had this approach of I'm going to make the movie that I want to make. And if you have a problem with that, you can go fuck yourself, basically. Right? It really felt like that, right? And
Essentially, yeah.
completely not compromising. Like clearly he wasn't making a movie for a mainstream audience. He wasn't doing fan service. He wasn't trying to make a movie that could potentially earn a lot of money. Um, he would just he had this singular focus, like I'm gonna make this movie, and if you got a problem with it, you can screw off, right? Um, so yeah, I will say that it's a bold move. Like you almost have to kind of respect that. The end product, you know, we'll talk about that. But just the audaciousness of it is it's kind of cool. I don't know. You just don't see that so often anymore. Like movie making it feels like it's gone through like a zillion test audiences and like all kinds of feedback has happened and there's like an assembly line quality to a lot of stuff we see. So to see something like this is a bit refreshing. Again, for me, initially, definitely. Later on, maybe not so much. But initially, yeah, like it's something else. It's definitely kind of refreshing in that respect. So on that
It,
note, oh, did you have a point to add, Porfirio?
Now I was gonna ask a question, like,
Go for it.
yeah, like, I mean, Christian kind of said it, but was there any songs or music that you guys liked?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because a lot of the music in the movie is like old songs. Like
Hmm.
there's not. I think there's new material, but for the most part, it's like a lot of like old classics, right? So like, did I like the music in the movie? Like, yeah, there's songs in there that I've enjoyed over the course of my life.
Hmm.
Certainly, there's some familiarity there, right? And the music is related to the characters too, right?
Hmm.
So there's like a storytelling component to them also.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, again, I'll say the same thing. Like initially, it was pretty cool, you know. Like instead of it's like a superhero movie where instead of fight scenes, there are musical numbers, right? Um, and it was just kind of novel initially, so it's kind of interesting that way.
Hmm.
Okay, so on that note, maybe we can shift over to some of the negatives. I kind of feel like the bulk of the conversation will be just like us asking each other questions and stuff. But let's just get to the negatives. I'm sure we have some to bring up. Um, Maybe we'll start with the musical numbers because I kind of brought that up as a positive, but I feel like it kind of wore out its welcome over time, and I thought there were too many musical numbers. And at the end, I was just kind of dreading it. It's like, oh, another one. I was like, just like counting the seconds for it to end, you know? So whereas initially it was like refreshing and new, you know, around halfway or so, it just became too much and became very tedious. I think there's one where Arthur's like on the phone singing. I'm like, oh God, no, like please end this now. I can't take it, you know. But yeah, thoughts about maybe the negative aspect of having this movie be a musical.
Yeah, I agree. There were just way too many, and like outside of a couple, like some were just like, all right, get to the point. Because I don't know, I think it feels like it halts the pacing a lot. Yeah, like they because all the songs are just kind of about how Joker and Harley kind of, they love each other and they want a life together. They're gonna build a mountain. And it feels like it's just all about the same thing
Hmm.
over and over. And so it really wears itself thin because there's only two locations in the movie. And so it you're just like, all right, get on with it. Where's this going? So yeah, outside of those two sequences that I liked, yeah, it wore itself out pretty fast for me.
Hmm. Yeah.
Tell me how you really feel, Christian. No, yeah, I agree with Christian. Like, as a big musical fan that I am, these musicals overstayed their welcome, you know?
Mm.
Like, like Christian, I thought there were just too many scenes where it was unnecessary. It was like, oh my gosh, no, they're going to musical mode. Here we go. Um, and so going off to what I was alluding to earlier, I was happy that they casted Gaga for this, and I liked her more in her musical numbers than her screen time as the character. I wish her character
Mm.
got more screen time and non-musical numbers because I thought what she had brought to the table was interesting, but they really just brought her in for these singing scenes, and it just over got overplayed. And I think that is the biggest criticism about her role in this film. It's not so much her singing or her acting, it's just the amount of musical scenes there were, you know?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think we've probably said enough about musical stuff, and I think we're all in somewhat agreement there. Now, here's something else I might pose. Um, one of the negatives I put down was the ending of the movie. So again, spoiler alert. So so we've been talking about how this movie doesn't really belong in any DC universe we know, etc. And really the only connection is the first Joker movie, right? It's in
Mhm.
that universe, right? It's in the same universe as that movie. So that movie I loved. It was a really great movie. And one of the parts that I really liked about Joker 1 was how it ended, where it had a pretty open-ended ending, right? It's sort of like, is Arthur Fleck the Joker? Or did he start this movement of like all these people, almost like an army of Jokers, and like, oh, is one of them going to become like the Joker we know and is going to take on Batman in the future, that sort of thing. But it's all open-ended and you can kind of come to your own conclusion. And I like that fact, right? You can sort of, paint it however you like. If you like the idea of Arthur Fleck being the Joker, well, he can be that. If you like the idea of him being the inspiration for the real Joker, okay, you can choose that adventure, choose your own adventure, right? So I thought they might go for a similar thing here, but the ending to this movie is very closed ended. It's very definitive, right? Because we see Arthur Fleck murdered at the end of this movie, right? He's killed, he's shivved, right? And he's definitely dead. So that's a pretty definitive end to this character, right? Um, and there's no like interpretive aspect to it. That like that's the way this movie ended, and there's no variant interpretation of it, right? And I really didn't like that because, like I've been saying, I like the open-endedness of the first one, but um, they really just closed the door at the end of this one. You guys have any thoughts about the ending to this movie?
Yeah, 'cause- yeah, one thing, I guess going off the first Joker movie real quick, I think like one of the things that's great also is like the unreliable narrator that they do throughout it. Um, and how you're never really totally sure if what you're watching is what's really happening. So, which fits with the Joker. That's, if but it's my past would be multiple choice is something along the lines of what the Joker says in The Killing Joke. And it kind of feels like that a bit when you're watching the movie. Whereas I think this movie kind of goes out of its way to recontextualize the plot of the first movie. That's it. Like it's very clear in what you they talk about what happens in the first movie a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think the way it ends is that it really wants to be clear that this is what happens. He's dead. He dies, and the Joker is just kind of an idea that keeps going. It kind of manifests itself through other people, and that just kind of just keeps continuing. And how like Arthur Fleck may be the idea that spawned the Joker, but the Joker is more than just one man. Which, yeah, I think that's a cool idea on its own. There's been Batman comics about that,
Mhm.
and he spawned so many like this entire movement. But when he can't be the Joker, when he kind of realizes, oh no, maybe that's not me. Maybe I'm just a guy. They kind of all turn on him. And so I think that idea works on paper, but I also think like because you never really get to see him be the Joker, you never truly get to see him do Joker things. He doesn't kill anybody in the entire movie. He doesn't, he just kind of sits in jail, goes to court, gets, he gets broken out in the explosion, but he just kind of gets caught immediately. And
Yeah.
so I think it's a bold ending, but it kind of leaves you very unsatisfied. I
Yeah.
think that like this is kind of why we're hearing about this getting a D on Cinema Score. This is why critics and audience, I think, really don't like it, is because it goes out of its way to kind of give you this gut punch that you kind of you can't help but leave with a bad taste in your mouth, even if you kind of appreciate the idea of what it's going for.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, that's my take on the ending.
Solid, solid. What about you, Porfirio? What did you think about the end?
Okay, so yeah, let me give you my answer to the ending, but then I want to ask a question, like a follow-up question to your question, Henry.
Okay.
Um, so my, oh yeah, I had a hard time swallowing up that ending. Because like if you like l watch closely, like that character, the one who kills the Joker, he's kind of like in the background throughout the film, and you're just like, okay, who is this dude? Like the camera, like when Joker leaves a scene, the camera leaves pointed at this dude
Mhm.
for like a couple seconds.
Yeah.
So there's always like this like foreshadowing of like, okay, who the hell is this guy?
Hmm.
And even at the ending, I totally forgot about him until he walks in that hallway. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And then when he kills them and then scars himself like Heath Ledger style in The Dark Knight for that Joker smile, I was like, okay, he is it's kind of I don't want to compare like Spider-Man and Joker together, but it's kind of like that saying like anybody can be any kind of character if they're influenced enough.
Mm-hmm.
And it yeah, like Christian talked about it, but Arthur maybe is not the Joker that people are used to reading the comics. He could be to some people, but the Joker is not Arthur. The Joker could be anybody, and it just sucks that like Arthur is the victim to his own creation, you know?
Hmm. Right. Well said.
And so the question I have for you guys is, so what I got from the gist of the movie and like the court case is again like this Joker image, and I felt like the film, I don't know if this was what Todd Phillips was trying to aim at, but I feel like he was targeting people who fantasize the Joker and sympathize with the Joker and just be like, hey, 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 like the Joker's a killer. Like he's a bad guy here. And it's like shown throughout the film with like people's fascination with Arthur and the Joker character. Even Lee leaves Arthur because she's like, I'm not in love with Arthur, I'm in love with the Joker.
Hmm.
And again, it's like this like people's obsession with what Joker means as a symbol. And so what I kind of got of this film is like kind of like the director in the studio targeting these fans who idolize the Joker and saying like, dude, you guys, the Joker's a killer. Stop with this like idealization of him. Like he's a bad guy. Like this is a film. Separate yourself fiction from reality. Um, and I feel like that's what they were trying to do with the trial. Like separate Arthur with the Joker. Like it's two different people, and that's what the defense was trying to claim. And I think that's what the studio is trying to deliver to viewers and fans of the Joker character. But yeah, what did you guys think of that? If that's what you guys got, or was I reading too much into it?
No, I get what you're saying. And I definitely felt something similar. Like this movie really is, it's like it's a movie about fans of the first movie because the
Hmm.
movie blew up so much more than I think. than anyone thought at the time. Became the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, and kind of spawned all these, diehard dedicated fans of the character. And so I think that maybe they may have idolized the Joker too much, and kind of Todd Phillips really wanted to set the record straight of like, this is not a guy you should follow and idolize. This guy is, just violence begets more violence, He's not like this like leader of the people. He's just craziness and,
Mhm.
craziness and chaos, and that just leads to more chaos.
Yeah, good point. Um, yeah, I I didn't have that take watching the movie, but now that we're talking about it, it makes sense what you're saying, Porfirio, that it does seem like that was like the underlying message of the movie, right? Arthur himself at the end, he kind of has a turnaround, right? Where he's
Hmm.
like, I'm not the Joker. I'm just this messed up dude, right? I'm not a guy who is like should be considered this like mythical leader of this movement, right? He's just this regular messed up guy. Um, so yeah, now that I think about it, it's kind of too bad. Like that if done well, I think that story could have been great. Could have made for a great movie, right? Where there's this guy who like started this movement and he kind of realizes like, well, this isn't me, but it's sort of too late where, the movement sort of takes hold and it's like a commentary on real life uh, fans,
Hmm.
possibly toxic DC fans. Um, but yeah, there's like a gold mine there, I think, for content, but just the way this story was told, it was a tough pill to swallow, musical numbers and this really like limited story where it's like just there's Arkham and there's a courthouse and like that's it. We're not leaving these places, right? And yeah, it's funny like it, the more I think about it, yeah, that's a pretty cool story to tell, but I just feel like maybe it wasn't told the right way here. But I like where the conversation's going. I think we can just kind of open it up to questions. That was a great question you posed, Porfirio. Any other questions we want to pose to each other about this one? I know this movie is not exactly straightforward, so I certainly had questions. Any questions we want to pose here at this point?
Hmm. Let's see. Well, as I'm thinking of mine, did you have any you want to ask us, Henry?
Well, I mean, I think we just answered this one, but one I wrote down is Arthur Fleck not really the Joker? Do you consider him the Joker? Like the Joker in the title of the movie, or just like the Joker
Just
that
yeah,
we know?
Yeah, I think again, this I feel like this was the message or the point that Todd Phillips tries to address in this movie, that Joker is so much larger than Arthur, and even Arthur thinks, he just had a bad day, he had a bad day that shit was just leading to one thing, one thing, one thing. He's had a shitty life his whole life, and he did not want to be the laughing stock on national TV, and it just snapped, he just had a bad
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
But he's not like this guy who's like trying to like defeat the system or like create chaos or rob banks or become a Batman villain or anything like that. Like
yeah,
I think, yeah, like this film was trying to separate the two, Arthur versus the Joker. And so it's even, yeah, far-fetched for me to say that Arthur is not the Joker, at least not the one that we're familiar with, or the ones that like people follow him and believe him to be.
Mm,
Mhm.
got it. Good
Yeah,
take.
because the Joker even says in the comics that all it really takes is one bad day to
Hmm.
bring someone down to our level. Our level meaning Batman and the Joker, so someone of their shared psychosis. And so the Joker really can be anyone, and Arthur Fleck very much had one bad day in the first movie. And
Hmm.
so I think now it's like, well, he could have been the Joker because he kind of becomes the Joker at the end of the first movie, the way, he how he acts on Murray, the way you see him create the smile with the blood, like you really see like the way you see him at the end, you're like, yep, that's the Joker. But in a way, he rejects the persona and changes so much that it's like he moves away from that. But everyone else kind of ends up becoming the Joker around him. Um, so I think Todd Phillips said that he is not the Joker in some interview that came out after the movie. It's just something I kind of found online that he said. But you also got to wonder if he's not the Joker, then like if then you also have Harley Quinn in the movie.
Hmm.
You have Harvey Dent in the movie.
Yep.
Like you have you kind of have all the elements of Joker,
Hmm.
and the guy who calls himself Joker, but all of a sudden he's not the Joker.
Yeah. And Bruce Wayne was in the first one, right? Young Bruce Wayne,
Yeah, you see the
right?
murders of the Waynes, so
Yeah. And oh, here's a follow-up question. So if Arthur Fleck is not quote unquote the Joker and he dies at the end of this movie, what was the point of all of this? Right? Why did we spend 4 hours following this guy's story? What was the point? Why?
Are you talking about both like Joker 1 and Joker 2?
Yeah, yeah.
I just think, it's a what's the best term I could use? Like a cash grab with a popular character name, you know? Like people like
Hmm.
Joker's such a popular name in pop culture. Like he's he's Batman's most recognized villain. That's why we have so many reiterations of the Joker. You know, each generation has their own Joker.
Hmm.
There was Jack Nicholson in the 90s, Heath Ledger in the 2000s, Jared Leto um in the 2010s, like each generation, each decade there's a new Joker. And I just think like there is a lot of complexity with this character, and maybe they just want to use the name as like a simple way to get people to watch this movie. Because, yeah, there is not a lot of Batman references or action scenes with it. They just want to tell a story of like um, a character causing anarchy and wanting to start a movement.
There you have it,
hmm,
folks. The whole point
there
of
is no
Joker
point.
1 and 2 was a cash grab.
I don't know, Christian, what do you think?
Like, you could almost say that for the second movie, I would say, because I mean, this movie is feels pretty unnecessary for the
Mhm.
most part. It seemed like I really like the first movie, but that feels like a very one and done type of movie. And this mostly just feels like a longer epilogue, than a full on movie. But I will say, like, what is the point? Because I was definitely thinking that while I was watching that and coming out, like, oh, what was the point of that? Um, I think the point is to kind of show like how like the negative influence that the Joker kind of has on Gotham City, and how you see a city kind of just kind of because it's kind of following this character and this kind of like chaotic idea, you see a Gotham just kind of go further and further downhill, and how in the first one there's a lot of rising tension, and then Joker becomes this kind of figurehead to kind of release the tension and kind of release it into like chaos and anarchy, and essentially create a world ripe for a character like Batman. You know, someone to kind of bring order kind of back to Gotham. You kind of see Gotham just get worse and worse and worse until, of course, you kind of create the need for somebody like Batman to go and clean up the streets, you know, take care of these jokers, take care of like, these villains that start popping up. So that's what I get it kind of what I get is the point is how dangerous it is to kind of follow these chaotic ideas like that, and kind of how much people like to manipulate others kind of for their own doing, kind of like Harley Quinn tries. It really is just manipulating Arthur um for herself, and how everyone kind of wants to these you have these massive crowds of fans who really want to see this side of someone that someone isn't, and when he isn't that person they kill him, and you just see that kind of fall further and further until you have Batman.
Hmm. Solid point. Yeah. Yeah, I like what you mentioned about how it's not so much about this individual's story, but rather just the idea
Mhm.
and the danger of that idea, right? The idea of the Joker being dangerous. And as I'm thinking about it, if you're like me and you are kind of frustrated with the ending of this movie, one way to soften the blow is maybe looking at these two movies as being a somewhat non-conventional origin story to the Joker. And I say non-conventional because it's not like, oh, this is the early days of this character. No, we're going even further back. We're going to the story of the person that ended up inspiring this whole like Joker ideology, right? So if you look at it that way, someone else picking up the mantle of the Joker as a result of this individual, then maybe it's not so frustrating. You can be like, oh, okay, that was the point of this whole thing, right? It wasn't completely pointless after all, right? Um, yeah. So any other thoughts, any questions coming up from this one?
I got a question for you guys. Like this is
Okay.
kind of like a not so much related about the plot or anything, but the the performance of the film,
Mm,
the critics. So currently on Rotten Tomatoes, this has a 33% by audience and a 34% on, sorry, 33% by critics and 34% by audience. Opening weekend, it only made 40 million according to Box Office Mojo, which is even lower than what Morbius and the Marvels made in theater. And if you look online, a lot of fans are bashing on it. They're walking out of the theaters, just criticizing the hell out of it. I have to ask both of you, does this film deserve that this much criticism?
want to go first, person?
Yeah, that is tough because I mean, we're
Here,
being very critical of it right
I
now.
was gonna say, here
I
we are
know.
criticizing it.
Yeah, we are coming down pretty hard on this movie itself, but I think like this movie is pretty unique, and it is a big swing. It's a swing and a miss, but I think like it's a swing and a miss, but you do have to appreciate just the fact that they did try like a big swing. They really did try something new here instead of something that say something more like Shazam Fury of the Gods or Aquaman the Lost Kingdom
Hmm.
that this movie doesn't feel empty. This movie doesn't feel like something it's like, "Oh, I've seen this before. Oh, this this just is just some sort of like action movie that feels like a cash grab." And while parts of it, this movie does feel unnecessary, at least they really tried something. And so that also kind of sucks to see that, that people just really haven't taken to it. Although I can understand why.
Hmm.
I think I understand why, and I really didn't like it myself. I do feel kind of bad for this movie that people have just really not liked it. People have really, you know, checked it off, even like opening weekend, as we all went and there were just nobody in our respective theaters.
Henry.
So yeah, that's a good question. Does this movie deserve all the hatred that it's getting? Um, I'd have to say yes, just because the final product is not great. And not only is the movie not great, but the first one was so good. Like if there hadn't been that movie, there wouldn't be that expectation, right? Going into this movie, I was looking forward to it solely on the fact that the first one was such a great film. I wanted to see the continuation, right? So I feel like maybe that is what happened to a lot of moviegoers, to a lot of critics. They saw the first one, enjoyed it, got a lot out of it, and saw this one and had this thought of what the hell did I just see? Right? It's a completely different experience, right? To Christian's point, you have to admire the approach that Todd Phillips took. He really swung for the fences. He uh he didn't mail it in. Like this is a very unique attempt here. Um, but ultimately it didn't work. It was a big miss. So yeah, sure. I think it does deserve the hatred it's getting. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think, Porfirio? Do you think the hate is overblown?
I think it's overblown. Like people being upset that it's a musical or whatever. Like, okay, again, like we've all said, like the musical was unique and it's interesting. It overstayed its welcome, but people being upset, like, oh my gosh, like it's too much of a musical, or sorry, let me kind of rephrase my answer. That people being upset with like the final project and walking out of the theater, it's like you knew going in it was gonna be musical. Um, you knew that what it was gonna be about. Like, if you didn't want to watch it because it's a musical, don't watch it then. And but there are definitely elements that didn't make it good, for sure. Like we've all been saying for the past hour. I just think like it was okay. There was plenty of room for so much things that could have been better. Less music scenes, less the running time. It was a 2.5 hour movie. It did not deserve to be 2.5 hours. Like we could have cut that by like an hour, and got the same plot. Like Christian said, it was they only went to Arkham Asylum and the trial. That's it. The trial was like half the movie, Arkham Asylum was the other half. We could have cut that by like an hour and still gotten the same plot. It would have went nowhere. Um, I just there was just so much room for improvement that it was okay. but I don't want to say it's like worse than Morbius or Madam Web. But that's my take.
It almost feels like Todd Phillips wanted to make a movie that pissed off everyone. You know, it almost feels like he kind of took that approach of like, I don't give a fuck, man. I'm just gonna piss everyone off. Like people are gonna talk about it, and I want that discussion to happen. You know, like I don't know if he wanted to make a movie that was like hated this much, but I think it just feels like there's an aspect to it where he wanted to ruffle some feathers, you know? I
Hmm.
kind of get that sense.
Yeah, like there's a it does feel like you're kind of watching like like kind of a middle finger of a movie
Yeah.
because the like how dour the movie is, the way it ends, like the way how it feels like it's a movie about this really dark side of fandom that maybe he experienced with the first Joker movie. Like I wonder if there's a lot of how he feels about the first movie and the reception to that movie
Hmm.
baked into this one.
Hmm.
So it does make you wonder. I wonder how people feel about this movie 10, 20 years from now. You know, will this
Hmm.
be a movie that's just forgotten? Will people still feel the same way, or do you think this could essentially time will be much kinder to this movie?
I
Hmm.
I
What do you
feel
think?
like I feel like 10 or 15 years people are gonna forget how bad this movie is and then watch it again and be like, "Oh yeah, it was that bad. That's why I haven't seen it in 10 years." You know?
You might have tapped into something there, Christian. Like, I don't think people are going to forget about this movie. Like, they're going to remember it. Maybe not for the right reasons, but it's a memorable experience, right? Some of the other movies we've been talking about, like the Shazam sequel, the Aquaman sequel, those are going to be like forgotten movies, right? But this one, I have a feeling, people are going to talk about the Joker musical movie for a long time. People aren't going to forget about this one for a while.
Okay, I have a question. So I didn't do much research into like production and um like the the crew who were involved in this project, but do you think this movie in any way was written or had like advice by people who have a background in writing musicals?
Oh, that's a good question.
Hmm.
Like, do you think like they just had screenwriters who knew how to make a good story? And then again, like Todd Phillips was like, I want to make this a musical, and they just tried to incorporate musical elements to it and it just fell apart?
Also, having no background on that, I kind of got the sense that there were people who sort of knew what they were doing
Hmm.
musical wise because of what I was saying earlier, like um it blurred the lines between the characters are actually singing versus stuff is happening in their heads. And I thought that was done kind of skillfully. So I kind of got the feeling there were some people with musical backgrounds working on it. That was
Hmm.
just my sense.
Christian?
Uh, I think so. I heard somewhere that originally this was meant to be a stage play, that they kind of wrote it that way, and that this idea kind of came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream.
Oh, I
And when
heard
they
that, yeah.
originally
Hmm.
working on it, they kind of wrote it and wanted it performed like live on stage, which feels a little for the concept. It feels there's something that feels a little more at home on stage. I think with the amount of musical numbers, seeing live performances,
Hmm.
definitely changes how you feel about the musical aspect to it.
Hmm.
And I think the fact that there's only just really just two locations also, I think it would probably work a lot better on stage. And so I do think there was some like definitely some skill and some like work and writing on writing those musicals and right out. But I don't know. At the same time, like you have all these other problems kind of with that aspect and kind of the pacing of the movie.
Mhm.
Like it's hard to, in a way, it's like it's hard to say.
Uh-huh. Okay. Now I have a new question. You know, we kind of talk about the character Arthur and Joker throughout the film, but we really haven't talked about the actor Joaquin Phoenix. You know, in the first movie, Joker won. He got an Oscar for this performance as the Joker.
Right. That's right.
Really well deserved, you know. This is a two-part question. Did he do a good job playing Arthur and the Joker again in this movie? And what did you think of him as a singer?
As a singer, I wasn't as into his singing voice throughout the movie. Uh, he's definitely no Lady Gaga, that's for sure. Um, but I mean, like I do find it like pretty captivating. I think once he like fully adopts the Joker persona in the courtroom scenes, I was like full in when he's doing this like foghorn leghorn like lawyer thing and he's representing himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the best scene in the movie is the scene where what was his name? Gary Puddles
Mm,
comes
oh,
in
yeah, yeah.
and he's on stage and you have this back and forth between the two. Like, I think that was like far and away the most captivating scene in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And like best scene in the movie. And of course that's him. That's kind of when you get the most Joker, in your Joker movie. So I quite like him in the role. The singing not as good, but he is great as Joker.
So he'll get the Oscar from you, just not the Grammy.
Yeah,
There you go.
that's a good way to
Henry,
put it. Yeah, pretty much.
Henry.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved Joaquin Phoenix's Arthur Fleck in the first Joker movie, and he did deserve the Oscar for sure. And here he reprises the role, and he's just as much that character here as he was in the first movie. Well, when he's not singing, kind of like what Christian was saying. Um, but yeah, in his normal dialogue scenes, he's that character again, and he is excellent in the role. And you could say that Joaquin Phoenix was born to play this character. He's great. Um, but yeah, that said, there's the musical component, which is a huge part of the movie, a huge part of this role. And yeah, that kind of all threw me off a bit because we've been talking about how the musical numbers are interesting because they play with what's happening in a character's mind versus what's happening um, in the context of the movie. The character is actually singing in front of other characters for real. But sometimes not. Sometimes it's all in Arthur's head. Um, so then why then, this is kind of what we're talking about, like, why then is Arthur like just kind of a mediocre average singer, whereas Lee is like amazing, right? She's like Gaga's voice in this movie is incredible. Like she's got it, man. And you know, if we're to list like, well, the short list of things to watch this movie for, that's one of them. If you want to see like an amazing Lady Gaga singing performance. Like this movie is that, right? But it does make for a weird conundrum, right? Why is the singing on Arthur's end just kind of average, but Lee is like this amazing singer? If it was all like in their heads, that'd be one thing, but they're actually, like I've been saying, there are parts of this movie where the characters are singing for real in the context of the movie. So it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really explain Lee having some like musical background, having an amazing voice. So it just that difference kind of like weirded me out a bit. So um yeah. So not only was Joaquin Phoenix singing not like super impressive, but also it was it didn't really fit vis-a-vis Gaga's performance, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, it was kind of a disconnect, I think.
You know, Gaga did release that album for the Joker movie.
Right,
How,
Harley.
right.
how was the album?
It's good. Yeah, it's basically all the songs are in the movie, but she sings them. No Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, there's no Joaquin at all on that album.
Mm-mm,
Oh,
mm-mm, they're all
interesting.
Gaga. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
That's probably a smart move.
Yeah, I'm okay with
So,
that.
so given Henry's comments, I'm pretty sure he might like it.
There you go. Yeah.
Sounds much better.
All right. So why don't we go to our ratings? What would you rate Joker Folie à Deux on a scale of 1 to 5? One being worst, five being best. Who wants to start it off here? Christian, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. This is a hard one to rate. Well, I think when I came out, I was like, okay, maybe a 2 out of 5. I appreciate I appreciate the concept and the idea. I think it's a good idea, just not executed well. And it can be hard to kind of weigh the two, the concept versus the execution. If you really like a concept, but you really don't like the way it's executed, how much does that weigh? Although after thinking about it for a few days and really coming around to it, even though I think there's some really good things about this movie. There's a couple of really good scenes. I I think the longer it sits with me, the less I like it, honestly. That could change as time goes on. Maybe I'll feel different in that 10 to 15 window. But man, I'm giving this a 1. I was not liking I do not like this movie, and I really don't want to see this movie again. I think that there were too many musical scenes, plot that feels like it goes nowhere, no action, no Joker moments for a movie called Joker. And I just leaves such a bad taste in your mouth. Um, Part of that I appreciate. I like when a movie is very subversive, but I don't think any of it worked. So 1 out of 5 for me.
All right, there you go. I can go next. So, yeah, I too did not enjoy this one. Not that not to that extreme though, I don't think. I'm gonna go with a 2 out of 5. Yeah, actually, for a good portion of the movie, I was kind of with it. I was hanging in there, and a lot of it is what we've been talking about. I appreciated the fearlessness of it. It took this approach that few movies take. The director was just like, I'm gonna make this movie, and this is what it is. No compromise. And yeah, early on, I felt there was a bit of a balance between normal dialogue scenes and musical scenes, right? Because going in, I had no idea. I was like, is it gonna be all musical numbers, or just some sprinkled in? Well, how's this gonna play out? And early on, I thought it had a nice balance where there were some normal dialogue scenes and some musical numbers sprinkled in, and I felt like it was, a decent ratio. But like we've been saying, like the second half, I was just kind of done with the musical numbers. I was like, I've had enough of that, right? And Christian, I like what you said earlier about this movie being basically a giant middle finger to everyone. I like that little analogy there. And I agree with that. And I would say that if there's one moment in the movie that really is a giant middle finger, it's not what you might think. I mentioned how I really disliked the ending when Arthur's killed. I think the big middle finger is when Arthur is recaptured. So we talked about uh the Arkham stuff and then the courtroom. The courtroom stuff ends with like this huge bomb going off, right? And it basically happens right before Arthur is sentenced, yeah, or is convicted, right? Um, and he escapes. And that's the moment where you're thinking, oh, this is how the Joker was born, right? He was gonna get locked up, but now he's free and he's gonna wreak havoc on Gotham City, and he's gonna become the Joker, right? But then like almost right away, he's recaptured, right? So that really is the middle finger, right? Todd Phillips kind of dangles the carrot in front of us and making us think, okay, this is the big payoff you've been waiting for, DC fans, right? This is the birth of the Joker. And then he like pulls the carrot away. He's like, nope, psych. Just kidding. We're sending Arthur back to Arkham, and it's back to this bleak landscape. All that shit that you were tortured through for like the majority of the movie. We're sending you back there. Fuck you, you know? So so that's the kind of movie we're talking about here. Bold, yes. Fearless, yes. Audacious, yes. But also incredibly frustrating. And it's one of these experiences that it's like it's barely a movie. There's hardly a plot, and like it a lot of what you hear is true. Like after the movie ended, I walked away thinking, "What did I just see?" That's a common reaction with this movie. What did I just see? What the hell did I just witness? That's this movie, right? So interesting, certainly, but um, it's hard to say that this is a satisfying movie experience on any level. So let's go with it 2 out of 5. Porfirio, what are your thoughts?
I feel like out of the three of us, I think I liked it the most. And even then, I had like the a lot of shit to say about this movie. But I give it a 2 out of 5 still. Um, again, I think this movie is okay. I don't think it deserves the hate that it's getting. Musical numbers overstayed its welcome. The plot was very predictable. It went nowhere. Um, there are some good moments. Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga did really great with the material that they were given and did the best with the characters with what they were able to work with. Um, but there was just a lot of shortcomings, which I give him props, Henry, like you said, for being fearless and being risky with taking this musical narrative, um, this concept with Joker's imagination and his mind. It just didn't pay off at the end. It could have, like we've all said, there were some scenes that really worked. but it just overstayed its welcome. And so yeah, my recommendation is if you really want to go watch this film because you're a Gaga fan or you just kind of want to build your own opinion, go watch it in theaters. If you're like on the fence or you're like, I don't know, then don't watch it. Save your money. Watch it when it comes on streaming, you know? Like this movie is not for you. I'm sorry. This movie was not it. This was a sequel that didn't have to be made. The first one was good. This one didn't have to be made, and it's something that again, like they tried doing something different and unfortunately they fell flat. 10 to 15 years, we could look back and be like, that was an experience. Was a good experience? We'll answer that question in 10 to 15 years. But for now, we could all just say it was an experience.
There you have it. All right. Okay, so it's funny, we've been talking about this movie that really doesn't feel anything like a superhero movie that has much of anything to do with comic books. But yes, the Joker, Harley Quinn, Harvey Dent, all these characters are from DC Comics. So let's end on a comics recommendation. Christian, what do you got?
Yes. So I am recommending the comic Joker. It's called Joker. It's written by Brian Azzarello, and the art is by Lee Bermejo. And so this has nothing to do with either of the two movies. Um, but this is a really great kind of, it's a very quick read. It's about, it follows actually a henchman of the Joker, how he gets into the gang and kind of what the Joker's really kind of like as this kind of gang leader and kind of behind closed doors. And so I highly recommend it. It's a really cool, different take on a Batman comic. Of course, it takes place in the DC, in your usual Batman universe, and you have all the characters you know and love, including Batman. So I highly recommend it. I think Brian Azzarello did a really great job capturing the vibe of Gotham for the regular person. And of course, Lee Bermejo's art uh, is pretty stellar. Channels a little bit of that Alex Ross vibe. So highly recommend Joker.
Excellent recommendation. Thank you for that. And with that, we can wrap up the episode. This is farewell from Henry, Porfirio, and Christian.